Hawks fans, welcome in to another edition of the Four Feathers podcast. It's Tony Marchese alongside a new face, Nick Neumayer. Nick, welcome to the show. Welcome everybody into the show. We've got some important Blackhawks news to talk about today. Some good Blackhawks news. Our last show, the bad news Blackhawks wasn't fun topics. We're going to talk about the same player, just in a slightly different manner today. Nick, we're going to get to a lot of things. We're going to introduce the audience to you first. We're going to talk about some Connor Bedard. We're going to talk a little bit about some Patrick Kane rumors. Maybe get to a couple other Blackhawks topics today. But first and foremost, be sure you're going to OnTap Sportsnet and checking out everything on tap in Chicago sports. And follow the show at Four Feathers Pod. You can follow myself at Tony on Tap. You can follow Nick at Nick Neumayer. Handle is right there on your screen. And if you're listening on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, anywhere else, it'll be in the episode description. So you can go give Nick a follow. Nick, how are you doing tonight? It is Saturday. Crack 'em. Cheers. I've got the Coronas going. Looks like you've got one of my favorites over there. But how you doing tonight, my friend?
I am doing absolutely fabulous. It has been a very good day. We got the Open Championships on, not to divert towards my other podcast, but we got a great weekend for golf and an even better weekend for hockey. This has been a long time coming. We've been kind of waiting for this news for since the offseason began of when is he going to sign this extension? Are they going to sign this extension? And we finally got that answer today. Connor Bedard has signed a 5-year extension with an average of 15 million a season. And yeah, the vibes are great.
The vibes are great, Nick, and we're gonna get to a couple of these other Nick Neumayer topics before we dive. It is great to see that we finally get this news, and it's just sort of the first domino. Really, the first domino was Bowen Byram and that trade, but the first domino in terms of Kyle Davidson's offseason checklist when it comes to making some big move signings right here, right? So Connor Bedard, don't want to bury the lead too much. 5-year extension, 15 million average annual value there. Nick, before we get to learning a little bit more about you, initial thoughts on the contract itself.
Yeah, I think, this was, as I mentioned, there was that anticipation on whether or when they would get this contract. Both sides basically throughout the season in their exit meetings talked about how they were both taking it at a pretty slow pace. It was both they were both kind of treating it as like a we'll get to it when we get to it. It's gonna happen. Like we're not worried about it. But the longer things went, like especially towards the end of the season, obviously that San Jose game to close out the year was pretty great, and that gave us some momentum to carry into the offseason. But the rest of the last half of the season was pretty bad. It looked really bleak, and then we didn't know what was going to happen with the contract. We weren't hearing anything about it. And then we got the biggest wrinkle in all of this is the shoulder injury. He went down again with a different shoulder this time, but with a shoulder injury. And I've always thought that, you always say, no news is good news. But in this case, I thought it was the opposite. I look back into like the Shohei Ohtani free agency sweepstakes, and I remember he said at the very beginning, like, if you guys leak that I had a meeting with you guys, I'm not going to sign with your team. And through the entire time, I'm like, the Cubs meeting hasn't leaked. We're good, guys. And then it turns out there just wasn't a meeting. So, like, the longer there was media silence on this, the longer that it took to sign this contract, the more concerned I was starting to get. But then it ended up working out. Obviously, yesterday was his 21st birthday, which it's kind of absurd to me that we're spending time talking about a 21-year-old signing a contract like that. But that's his birthday. He signed his entry level contract on his birthday as well. So we kind of figured that something was coming at or around this time. But it's very good just to we can get into sort of the specifics of the contract and like length and what that means long term. But as you said, it was a significant. Obviously there's more moves to make this offseason, and we'll see if Kyle Davidson's willing to do those. But obviously the number one priority was to re-sign Bedard, and he did that.
Yes, absolutely. I agree with a lot of the things that you say here. With number one being that was probably one of the most crucial, if not the most crucial, uh, tasks on Kyle Davidson's offseason to-do list. You didn't want to see him go into the last year of his ELC and have to play this game, and the Hawks didn't. Now, there might be some people who are a little salty about that online. They don't live in Chicago, they live elsewhere. We'll talk about them later. However, it's good, and this is my initial thought. It's good to know he's here for at least 5 more seasons, and I think it'll be a lot longer. We'll get into some contract details and some other things in just a bit. But Nick, I want to introduce the rest of the crowd to you and our listeners to you. You've been here at OnTap Sportsnet now for a little bit, 2 months now, just about.
Probably
You
a little
and
more.
maybe a little bit more. Time flies when you're having fun, Nick. Time
I
flies
know,
when
yeah, it's been a blast.
but you also host another podcast, and I'm surprised that we're not on a podcast right now talking about golf and Bryson DeChambeau and all of the crazy theatrics that have
Can
happened
we
across the
please
pond.
not?
We
I'm
can
so sick
save
of
that.
hearing that name.
We could save that for a different show. And why don't you tell everybody about that show, Center Cup Pod, and what you're doing over there, and give everybody a little bit of background about yourself.
Yeah, so that show is the Center Cup podcast on Tap Sportsnet. It's three Northwestern graduate students, myself, Will Neary, and Kyle Muserino, and we've been talking golf since January, since right before the start of the season. We do 2 episodes a week. We do our recaps of the previous events, just kind of going through all the major storylines, and then our preview of the upcoming events each week. And so we pretty much just take you through the tournaments, through all those news, all the storylines. We've had a lot of storylines this year in terms of breakout golfers, is it living or dying? Nobody knows. And it's been a lot of fun. We have some fun on the show. We play a lot of pick'em games. We have our picks every week. I don't pick very good players, or I think I pick very good players, and then they don't do very good for me. But
I followed your guys standings board on your pick plays, and Nick, I have to say that you're a little behind
it's not
Will and
looking good,
Kyle there.
Tony.
You
It's
got
not
you got
looking
some
good.
work. You got some work to do. I will say that, but I do enjoy the show, and that's one of the reasons it's on the network. Nick, I think you guys cover golf excellently over there at Center Cup, and Nick, you also do some golf writing here at OnTap Sportsnet as well. And now you're starting to dabble in a little bit of Blackhawks stuff. And I met you at a Blackhawks game this past season.
You
It was the
did.
first
That's
time
right.
I met you. Um, let's talk a little bit about your Blackhawks fandom. What started it? And then we'll get into, some of your favorite memories and stuff like that. But Nick, how did you become a Chicago Blackhawks fan?
It's funny. I don't necessarily remember how I became like I don't remember the date or anything like that. I think my first real memory, or my first concrete memory, was game 6 of 2013. I I didn't really know a thing about the team, about and I kind of knew they were in the finals, whatever, but I was a kid at the time. I was probably 11 years old, maybe 10, something like that, and I was asleep during that game. And I got up in the middle of the night to just get a glass of water, and to paint the picture. So there was my room, and then the hallway exiting my room, and then to the right of the hallway is the living room. And so as I was walking out, I see my parents sitting on the couch watching the game. But when I sat down next to them, it was 5 minutes remaining in the third period.
What
So
a first game to remember.
I saw 17 seconds, and I remember vividly my dad turned to me and he said, this is history right here. And that's a memory I've carried with me. And I think since then, I started watching them throughout that time. I think that next season was when I started watching. I think I went to my first game that year as well, and um, just been watching them ever since.
What a great story to just remember as your first Blackhawks moment. And I
Oh
know,
yeah.
I'm a little bit older than you are, Nick. And there's a lot of people out there who try and, just get online and rag on people for, joining the quote unquote Hawks bandwagon at
I
like
was 10. It's not my
you were
fault.
10. It's not your fault. So you entered at the perfect time. Like you entered at like the pinnacle time of Blackhawks fandom right there. And I apologize because you started off on a very, very high note as a young child, and you've had to watch the crumble and the downfall and the rebuild and all this, and you've stuck with it. Obviously, met you at a Hawks game for the first time last year. So my next question was going to be favorite moment. Let's throw the 2013 Cup aside, right? Because that's like, I don't know how you top that. I don't know how you top 17 seconds being I woke up to go get water and I sat down and I witnessed history. Also, shout out Blackhawks Cowboy. I saw he is out there on X. I saw him out there and he's in Boston and he was at TD Garden earlier today. So I saw that. And now you're bringing back, he was posting about 17 seconds. Now we were talking about it on the show. Just wanted to give Cowboy a shout out real quick. But Nick, best moment outside of 17 seconds for you in Hawks history.
So I have two. They're kind of tied in my eyes. I was at the Vermette game where he scored the double overtime, and my visit, like I feel like
Wow.
every game has like a vivid memory for me. And the memory from that one was that I believe it was like midway through or like second intermission. I got like like one of those like little styrofoam cups of French fries or whatever, like just for a little snack. And then by the end of that second overtime, that cup that was this big, I had folded into a square about the size of this, just because like I was like I was stressed like beyond belief. And like when that goal came in, I legitimately almost like blacked out screaming. Like that was truly one of the most high intensity games that I've been to. Um, the other memory was it was that same year, that same playoff run, but the clincher against Nashville at the United Center. And I remember it was Kane's goal where he was set up like at the faceoff. It was right at the end, I believe the end of the first period, if I recall correctly. And he was set up like right outside the faceoff dot. And I remember I was sitting next to my dad. I looked at him like, why is he positioned like that? And my dad's like, just wait. And then 5 seconds later, puck goes straight to him, smacks it right in. Proved me right, or proved me wrong, I guess. And that was incredible. And then I guess I'm cheating here. You asked for one, I'm going to give you three. This is
All right, fair. There's a lot to pick from.
This is on the topic of our topic today. This was the first cup, or not the first cup, or not the first Hawks game I went to with. No, it might have actually been the first time I saw Bedard play. Was the Winnipeg game, the first Winnipeg game where I think he scored in between his legs with his first goal. I went with my brother. It was I had him come down. So I went to for more introductions. I went to Loyola Chicago for my undergrad. I had an apartment over there, and I had my brother come stay down with me. We went the two of us to the game, and then he stayed by my apartment. And obviously, Bedard scores that incredible overtime goal that I still watch when I have a bad day. And it was moments like that where it's like that feeling of happiness and excitement. I haven't felt those feelings since the Dynasty days. And like that was the first.
Yeah.
Obviously, I knew how special he was going to be. I knew he was going to be a very great player, but that was the first like real concrete feeling where it's like we're due for some very special days very soon.
Hey, here's to hoping, right? Here's to hoping. We do
Oh, yeah,
need
I'll
some
drink to that.
special days. We do need some special days back. And it's important to look back and just recount some stuff. You seem to live and breathe some Hawks, Nick, and I think that's why I want to ask some of these questions and get the listeners sort of acquainted to who you are and just a little bit more about your Hawks background. Now I asked the best moments. You can't ask the best moments without revisiting some of the worst. So lay it on me. You got like a bad Hawks moment. What pissed you off the most? Is there a day that you got irrationally mad at this team, and why?
I mean, I think first and foremost, the trading, or I guess not the trading, because Taves didn't get traded, but that deadline. I was actually in Italy. I was studying abroad during then, so like I wasn't able to like watch those games and like be so like I was almost like desensitized to what happened, so I didn't really get to experience that. And then, but if you want to know like my worst memory, that like I probably the worst game that I ever went to, it was that same year, that 22-23 season. And
It was a tough
I
one.
would I think it was against Carolina. I think it was that like 3-0 loss to Carolina in like November, I think it was. And that game stands out to me because I took a girl to that game as a date. She didn't know it
Oh
was a
boy.
date. She thought we were going as just friends. And so I had to deal with that and a very, very shitty Hawks game.
Nick, that sounds like a tragedy. We're gonna dig in on this one on another episode. We're gonna write this down. We're gonna dig into this on another episode because we got to talk about Connor Bedard and the extension. But this sounds like that there's some gold behind this, Nick. And yeah, that's notated now, and
Oh
we'll
God.
revisit that at a later date. And I'm sure the listeners are going to want to find out how that all turned out. And maybe if we get enough time at the end, we'll ask some of those questions. But Nick, those are some great Hawks memories. I know you live and breathe Hawks. We talk about the Hawks all the time. Even though you primarily do a lot of golf stuff here, you've worked your way in on this Hawks crew, and we've seen some of your writing coming out on your Hawks takes. Now you're on Four Feathers podcast. So here we go. Let's talk about the Connor Bedard extension at some more length here, Nick. As we said at the top of the show, 5 years, $15 million AAV. Here's an important note on this. There is a full no movement clause just on year 5 of the deal. Interesting. And I want to talk a little bit about that full no movement clause and what it means at the end of his contract in just a minute. Nick, 5 years has come into play. We've seen this before. Patrick Kane took a 5-year deal at the exact same point that Connor Bedard did. I believe you mentioned that at the top of the show. Many other players that are superstars or stars in general have taken this type of contract. Connor Bedard will ride this contract into his age 25 season. He's going to be young. He's going to be due another payday, and we'll see what happens there. Does the term concern you at 5 years? Because some people wanted or expected 8. Some people thought it might have even been shorter at 3 with a higher AAV just to, sort of kick the can down the road a little bit. Let's talk just completely about term right now. I don't want to get the dollars involved, but are you worried about the term at all? And what are your thoughts on the 5 years?
I'm not necessarily worried, so to speak. I do think it gives you that timeline where I think the biggest task, obviously, we said that the domino would fall, the biggest checklist on Kyle Davidson's notepad was signing this extension. Number two, and which now becomes the de facto number one, is going to be getting a getting a team that is worthy of a championship in those 5 years. You basically set a deadline to where, he's given you his faith for the last 3 years that things are going to get better. And now he's giving you his faith for another 5 years. And, you look at nobody has been a bigger poster child of that than Connor McDavid, of just, giving the Oilers chance after chance until finally he signed a 2-year deal, which basically said, you have 2 years to get your shit together, and if you don't, then I'm leaving. And so that is where things sort of lie with the Blackhawks now, is that you need to make sure that you're maximizing those 5 years. Obviously, this team, you know, unless there are further moves made this offseason, which we can get into later in the show, I don't think this team is a playoff caliber team heading into this year. So that's essentially year one of his deal just thrown out the window. And the difference is that team going to be another lottery team, or is it going to be a closer to 500 team? And that is going to decide what year two is. So we're not thinking playoffs until at least year two of his deal. That's the part that concerns me a little bit, is that 8 years would give you a bit more flexibility. 5 years gives you a bit more urgency in that regard.
Fair enough. And here's my thoughts on 5 years, Nick. And I think, I am by no means patient. And I'm sure if Ron Luce was on this show, I don't know if he's listening right now, he will tell you I'm not patient, especially when it comes to the Chicago Blackhawks. But I'm just looking at, some long-term contracts that the Hawks have signed. When we get to 2030, 2031 season, there's only a couple contracts on the books right now, Nick, and this is interesting to me, just the way that this is building out. Because past 2031, there's only two other names that are signed here past Connor Bedard, and that would be Frank Nazar, who signed an extension already, and I think that that's sort of been forgotten about a little bit, that Frank Nazar is already locked up. He's locked up till 2032, 2033, and it's going to be 6-6 for Frank. And then you've
It's a
got
very
Bowen
team
Byram,
friendly deal.
which could look very, very team friendly, especially if Frank Nazar, continues to improve. I think 6-6 is going to look great and allows you to keep another center around, or someone who's going to need another raise if Frank Nazar turns into a franchise cornerstone piece himself. And Bowen Byram, and he's going to be on at 12-5. No one else is even signed. And so when you look at the 2030, 2031 Blackhawks, you have three guys. It's Connor Bedard at 15, Frank Nazar at 6.6, and Bowen Byram at 12.5. There's going to be room to work there, Nick. There's going to be a lot of room to work. So I like the foundation. Now, some of that's going to hinge on some other RFA names that are going to be due for contracts next season or even the season after that. And that includes Anton Frondell, Sam Renzel, Oliver Moore, Nick Lardis. You still have some work to do there next offseason to get some of those guys locked up before they go RFA. And then you've got Wyatt Kaiser, Lev Shinoff, Ryan Green, who's another year older, and Landon Slaggert, RFAs at the end of this season, Nick. So we'll see what that long-term looks like. But I want to get now into the dollar value of 15. I think, at least the way I'm reading this right now, is I think that's a fair contract for him and could potentially be pretty team-friendly for the amount of points and production that Connor Bedard puts up in comparison to what you're seeing tossed around on some offer sheets throughout the league. I thought Connor Bedard was probably going to land maybe 16-ish. So, hey, there's an extra $1 million in savings off of where I was before. I think 15 is extremely fair for him, given some of the injuries that we've talked about that have already taken place. Obviously, he's going to miss at least the first month of the season coming up here. Don't like seeing that. I don't know how much the injury really impacted the dollar amount in this contract, or his previous injuries impacted the dollar amount that was handed out. But I think, just from where I sit, 5 years, $15 million, I think that's an extremely friendly deal for both sides and both parties in this. And I'm happy they came to a resolution on that, because initial reports were coming out that they were originally offering somewhere around 12 is what I was seeing out there, Nick. And, there was all of this sort of hoopla over whether or not the Hawks are going to have to jump all the way to 17 million. Hey, you settled somewhere there in the middle. I think 15 is good. What do you think about the salary? Is it too high, too low, just right? Where are you at?
I think there's two ways to look at this. You would look at this at face value of a player that is entering his fourth season and has missed significant time due to injury in two of those three seasons. That's not a player that I would typically dish out the third highest average in NHL history to. But at the same time, the reason that we're approaching these figures in the first place is because that with the new CBA coming, with the way the salary cap has been increasing, we're going to see it start to get north of 100 million per team. So there's that. That's part of the
I think
reason
that's
why.
coming. I think that's coming in short order.
Right. And so that's why they didn't do this last season. That's why they waited until this offseason so they can get a better idea of where the salary cap is going to be. And so that's why you see someone like Leo Carlson getting 18 million for an offer sheet. He is nowhere near the player that Connor Bedard is. Bedard could have probably netted somewhere in the 20s if he wanted to. And Kyle Davidson probably would have gave it to him in order to make sure that he stayed. I think the reason that you're seeing these deals come out is because you're obviously taking a big gamble on Bedard at this point. He's shown flashes that he was a well over a point per game player before his injury at the beginning of this past season, but you're taking a gamble that he's going to take that step and be that player that is worth that deal. And so I think at face value, he's not worth 15 million right now, but there is that potential for it to be a pretty good deal, if anything, an underpay, given where the economy is going for free agents soon.
I like it. I like it. I like the take there. We got some comments in here. Where's the main dude? Where's Ron Luce? GM Ron. I don't know if he's the main dude. He does host this show. But Ron Luce is currently taking in some adult beverages, enjoying a party that he is at right now and was unavailable for tonight. Sorry, Lebowski 55. You will get Ron's opinions on this. He said he needs the main guy's opinion on this. Learn his name. Come on, Lebowski. Learn his name. It's GM Ron. Main guy.
You're stuck with me, Lebowski.
Yeah, we're just holding the fort down here. I'm glad you're tuning in, but learn Ron's name. Put some respect on that man's name, please. Sorry, no, don't apologize. You don't have to apologize. I want Ron's opinion too. I want Ron's opinion. He's texting me right now. We'll get his opinions in a couple of minutes if he keeps answering. We'll see. Thanks for tuning in, Lebowski. Nick, I thought you broke that down excellently. It is like a historic contract, right? It's top 5 in terms of AAV. I don't even look at it that way right now. At least that's where I'm at. I don't even look at it as if it's in top 5 because I have a feeling that you're going to see Macklin Celebrini probably shatter that.
Oh God, he's going to reach
a
20,
couple of
100%.
years. And so Bedard's contract, in my opinion, will look a little bit different. And granted, different timelines, they're off by a year, but let's see what the Sharks hand Celebrini next year, and then we can revisit sort of what the AAV looks like here. That's kind of what I'm thinking. I don't know. Everybody wants to compare those guys, so I'm throwing the first name out there that I think is going to break that. And then you have to look at some of the other guys that will come in here. Lebowski, he'll get 20 million AAV. I don't out of reach at all for Celebrini, and they're going to have to pay that. And guess what? That $5 million extra dollars that the Hawks will have over, I'm guessing, I'm just guessing they'll lock him up for 8, and it'll become a contentious talking point in Hawk circles and in Vancouver that like, oh wow, Celebrini's staying with the Sharks for 8 years, and Connor Bedard doesn't like Chicago, so that's why he only signed for 5. You already know what's going to happen. But he'll get 20, and then this will look good for the Hawks because we already just kind of talked about, some of these names that are going to need to be signed. Frondell, do you give Artie a long-term deal? I don't know yet. There's a lot at play there, and just like Lebowski was saying, I want GM Ron's opinion on this before I go spouting off and saying things, because I do not have a PhD in salary cap geography like Ron does. So it's going to be interesting to see how Kyle Davidson continues to navigate this, or any other GM who's in the position at the time where you get to the end of Connor Bedard's contract. I'm not putting it out there that he's going to be there. I believe that Davidson's on a 3-year deal, just because I believe that every sports executive is on a 3-year deal. That's not I'm not putting it out there that I have any information on, how long or what the plans are, but I assume that there's a chance that some of these players will be here post Kyle Davidson, and we hope that Bedard's here for a long time. But Nick, there's a lot more work to do, but this is a good stepping stone. I think that, that 15 million is going to look a lot different in 3 or 4 years, just as, Ron has mentioned on this show. Bowen Byram's 12.5 will look a lot different in 3 or 4 years. Now let's get to the elephant in the room here. Who's going to play with Connor Bedard and, continue to help him want to stay in Chicago? And there's been a lot of rumors, Nick. We've heard a lot of rumors, and we've heard things from former Chicago Blackhawk great Hall of Famer Chris Chelios the other day that Blackhawks legend himself and current Detroit Red Wing Patrick Kane is down to 2 teams that he's looking at to sign with. One of them being the Chicago Blackhawks. And wow, did I have to press X to doubt that was actually a real thing at first. And then Buffalo, his hometown, a team that is a playoff contender, a team that's a little further along than your Chicago Blackhawks are right now. And you have to wonder, why did Chris Chelios come out, I believe it was on 670 The Score, and release this? Why does Chris Chelios have this information? Why is this being put into the universe right now? Because I'm not one that wants to get up for the letdown, Nick. I don't want to get up for the letdown. We've done this drill every year since Patrick Kane has left. Is he coming back? Is he not coming back? And now it seems like there's a real possibility that Patrick Kane can be coming back to the Chicago Blackhawks, and I want to evaluate it with you. What are your thoughts here?
I think first and foremost, in regards to Chelios, I'm not surprised that he has that inside track. I know obviously his daughter works for the Blackhawks, but at the same time, Kane is, I don't think it's hyperbole to say that Kane is the greatest American-born player in history, but Chelios is probably number 2 or 3, depending on your perspective there. And so I think there's definitely a relationship between the two. They've definitely been close over the years, back from Kane's time in Chicago. So it doesn't surprise me that he has the inside track, first and foremost. And in regards to where he's going to go, I've been wondering, where he would go, because he's at the point in his career where he's not necessarily going to start fresh. He's going to go somewhere where he has a connection. You look at, he essentially forced the Blackhawks to trade him to New York. I mean, I'm not going to say I didn't force them to, but they specifically engineered that to trade him to New York.
Right.
So that he could play
they gave
with
him
Panarin.
they gave him, options of where he wanted to go.
Exactly. So, and he chose New York because he wanted to play with Panarin. Now, ultimately, you look at that deal and you look at the actual names we got back, that's not great. But yeah, at the end of the day, they took the bargaining power away once they knew that he wanted to go to the Rangers. But he wanted to go to the Rangers so that he could play with Panarin, his good buddy from his times in Chicago. And then when New York didn't really work out, he went to Detroit, where his other buddy, Alex DeBrincat, was playing. And so now you look at where things stand now, because it kind of sounds like that bridge with Detroit is kind of, both sides are kind of ready for it to be done. So where does he go now? Let's take inventory of his buddies. He could rejoin Panarin again in LA, which that didn't really work out the first time. So I don't think he would be anxious to do that. You could go, find Dylan Strome in Washington, or you could go home to Buffalo or go to your other home in Chicago. So it's I've always thought, at the back of his head, he was thinking about Chicago, but Chelios's comments make me think that an offer is on the table, which I quite frankly never expected to see.
I think I'm at the same point. I never expected there to be an offer on the table. just given a lot of the discussion around this topic for the past couple of years. It's always been sort of noted that, the Hawks were done with that era. We wanted to move this out so that, Connor Bedard can establish his own team. They bring in this cast of characters, Nick Foligno, Corey Perry at the time. You get Tyler Bertuzzi in here. There's some names. There's names. You could just they're moving in all these guys who aren't really Hawk. They're not Dynasty Cup guys, right? They're from all over the league. Pat Maroon,
Big Pat Maroon guy.
Martinez was here. Was not a fan of the Martinez thing. Now he's on post-game shows. It's very weird. It brings I have scars from that whole thing.
Yeah.
Very weird. So you bring in all this sort of like anti-Hawk culture into this room to sort of reset everything. And then now you hear Chris Chelios go out and say that. I don't think he would if there wasn't an offer out there. It has to be sort of firm. I saw something today. Patrick Kane was out in New York at Fanatics Fest. I know my brothers are out there right now at Fanatics Fest as well. And somebody asked Patrick Kane today, I don't know if you saw this on the timeline, this was a Buffalo thing. Are you coming back to Buffalo? And he kind of gave like this answer that made me even more kind of like wondering. He's like, well, if I knew the answer to that, I would say it, but I haven't decided yet. And then no one asked him if he's coming back to Chicago to see if there was a different answer to that question, Nick, but it was being played very close to the vest. I know Buffalo's probably just as excited to potentially have their hometown hero come back and play for them. But, we've talked a little bit about this offline, and I know I've talked to Ron about it so much. Well, I think one of the benefits to coming back to the Chicago Blackhawks is the role he's going to play here if he chooses to do so. You're not going to be buried behind a lot of guys. You're not just going to potentially be a third line, wing that's there to sort of score. And maybe that's better for him at this stage of his career. I don't know. But in Chicago, he's going to be a top six forward. He's going to get those minutes. He's going to get power play looks. He's going to be celebrated. There's going to be a lot. I would think a lot more positive media coverage. He gets to come back home to where he already owns a home. Pretty sure his family still lives here through the summer. So there's benefits to both ends of this for him. But at the end of the day, I don't want to count the chickens before they hatch. Because, like I said, I don't want to get up for the letdown. I'm still sort of waiting for the announcement to not be Chicago and be really upset about it, because now we've gotten to this point in this, I guess, negotiation. The Hawks have a ton of cap space. Can you imagine if we lose a bidding war to Buffalo for Patrick Kane's services for the next couple of years? People are going to be hashtag, as I like to call it, mad online. That's not going to be good. We don't want to see that. So I hope for the Hawks' sake, and I hope for Kyle Davidson's sake, this one gets across the finish line. If he's in the final two teams, I guess we'll say it this way. It would behoove them to make a very strong offer. I think 2 years. I don't know, $5 million, somewhere around there. It's probably a little bit overvalued for what he's worth right now at the moment, potentially. I don't know if the money even matters to him, but I feel like you got to find a way to get this one done, especially after saying that they were done looking at free agents, and now all of a sudden Patrick Kane's name is on the table. Find a way to get it done.
I can certainly say that if he chooses Buffalo, it's not going to be because the Blackhawks lost out on a bidding war. I could certainly say that's the case right there. It'll be because he made that choice. We saw Jonathan Toews talking about.
That's not how people are going to portray it, though.
Oh, of course. But I could certainly say that that's more than likely not going to be the reason that the Hawks don't sign Kane. It's going to be because he chose Buffalo. You look at Jonathan Toews talked about when he was making his comeback that, the thought of going back to Chicago never really crossed his mind because he if he came back to Chicago, he would be number 19 Captain Sirius. Whereas if he started over at a new team, he'd be in a new role in a new place, just trying to create that new identity that he was trying to in his comeback. So Kane, he's had 3 years of finding himself in that regard. So maybe, there's that desire to come home and, you know, reclaim, Kane was always more of the showman than Taves was. So, there's this, even, that's another good and or bad Hawks memory was I was at that first homecoming Kane game, the Detroit game, where he scored the overtime goal. And so every Red Wings game that he's been here, he still gets a lengthy ovation. He still at the end of the game goes and he still goes and salutes the fans. He still has a deep appreciation for the fans, and so there's also that he's 37 years old. He's at the tail end of his career. We can say that. But I think the narrative has been that he's going to sign a 1-year deal with Detroit and retire, but I don't know. I can't say for a fact that that's what's going to happen. I think he does still have some gas in the tank and could potentially play 2, maybe even 3 years if he wanted to. And so you look at, Buffalo right now would be that immediate playoff push that he's looking for. But if he sticks around for long enough, maybe he could be a part of a playoff run in Chicago.
Yeah. Hey, 2-year deal, 3-year deal. Maybe you go 2 years and you see where he's at, and you get the 1-year deal again on the tail end of it, and that's it for him. I can't see him going past 3. Crazier things have happened, but I think, giving him a 2-year deal right here, there is a chance that the Hawks sniff the playoffs next year. We've already talked about some of the improvements that have been made. I still think you're going to need to acquire another top 6 talent. I said this on our last show. I don't think Patrick Kane in his current state really moves the needle 100% in the direction that we need it to go.
No,
But maybe
it's a
that
ticket sales.
Yeah, maybe that lessens the need for another, premier forward in terms of like top tier talent, and makes it easier for you to acquire something that's also going to add on and help this. But you also have to kind of be prepared that if Patrick Kane does step back into this, it's not going to be the same version of Patrick Kane that you loved and adored 10 years ago. There's going to be a little bit less. And I think, there's going to be people who might be a little upset at that, but age is a factor here. There's a lot of miles on that. And, I think for me, some of the nostalgia of it and just the talent and the veteran presence of a Patrick Kane here, alongside Connor Bedard, Lebowski and here with another comment. Patrick Kane could be part of 2 separate Blackhawks Red Risings. We got another one in there from him. Bedard would be the best player that Kane has played with since Patrick Sharp in 2015. He's better than Brinkett and better than Panarin. And that's the truth. You can already kind of see that. Connor Bedard's trajectory is above both
I'd
of
push
those.
back on that one, though. The trajectory, yes, but DeBrincat is a
right now, no,
scorer.
but
yeah,
that's fair.
Let's dial back on the hyperbole a little bit. And this is, like we said at the beginning, you are giving him that extension for what he can be, not for what he is right now.
That's fair. That's fair. However, 30 goals in 69 games. Give him a couple more games, give him some other guys on the wing. I think he's going to be a 40-goal scorer. I think he's going to be a 40-goal scorer.
I agree with you. But,
very easy. I think he's got some talent.
Yeah. And so I think, but at the end of the day, you're not bringing in Kane to be Showtime anymore. You're most certainly not bringing in him to score the goals. You're bringing him in to be that voice in the room. And, when you saw it was like a 10-game losing streak that the Hawks had last year, and it was right after the trade deadline, and you could clearly tell that they were in the middle of a very bad stretch, and they didn't quite know how to get out of that stretch. You could tell the moment was a bit too much for them, and you didn't have the Folinos, you didn't have the Dickinsons, the Connor Murphys that could kind of give some advice to those players. When they drafted Bedard, one of the first things they did was sign Taylor Hall. And that was meant to be like a number one overall pick mentor for Bedard. There was another number one overall pick that did not get signed by the Blackhawks that arguably could have been a better mentor to Bedard. I rest my case. But, you have the opportunity to rectify that mistake, sort of. And, I think Kane, you look at what he was from a leadership standpoint back during the Hawks days, and he was not they only gave him the A, like, I think Sharp, Keith, and Seabrook all got A's before Kane did. He was never that leader. He was the guy that scored goals. And so I do think that, they're not going to slap the C on him if they were to bring him back. And even, we've seen that, in that Detroit game, the very first time they played, you kind of saw Bedard rough up Kane a little bit, kind of to say, this is my team now. And so I think that you have that dynamic where Kane is not going to be he's going to be a leader of this team, but I think they will make it very clear that it is still Bedard's team, but Kane will be that older mentor that he knows how to win, but he also knows how to win in Chicago.
I think you're pretty spot on with that. There's a lot of good reasons to bring Patrick Kane back, and there was a lot of good reasons to keep him here. And I'm not going to pretend that I haven't talked about him on the show before, Nick. History is what history is, but I think if he is here, his ability to sort of bridge the gaps between what was the best era in Blackhawks hockey and what should be the next best era in Blackhawks hockey is important. And I think it would be a really, really cool story and a great ending to Patrick Kane's career. And there's so many other reasons to bring him back. And the ticket sales are probably one. If you're listening, Jamie Faulkner, please tell Kyle to get that contract done. Nick, it's just about time to get to our regularly scheduled segments on this show as we close it down in the last 10 minutes. Are you ready to ruffle some feathers?
My debut feather ruffling?
Yes, let's do it.
It's time to ruffle some feathers.
All right, Nick, this is the segment where we potentially could piss some people off online and get them hashtag mad online like I talked about earlier. I'm going to give the floor to you and let you start the ruffling of feathers off.
So my take for what should be done. So let's assume in this hypothetical scenario, the Hawks do sign Kane, or, whether or not they sign him, Kane's going to be a top 6 guy. He'll be on that left wing. I still think right now, assuming no Kane and assuming Bedard is healthy, that first line is probably going to be Bedard, Roman Kontsarov on the left, and then a combination of Ryan Green or Anton Frondel on the wing. And you could either put Frondel on the wing, or you could go down the line of Bedard, Nazar, and Frondel. It's like you go from Frondel being a first line winger or a third line center. So I want the Hawks to go and trade for Shane Wright and plug him in at that 3C spot, because Shane Wright is similar to Bedard. He's 22 years old. He was a 4th overall pick in 2022. We thought he was going to be the next big thing. Has had an incredibly disappointing career so far. He's 44 points in his age 21 season in 2024-25 was his sort of breakout year, I guess, but it still he hasn't been able to take that next step in his career. It's very clear he needs a change of scenery. There's already teams that are interested. Vancouver is one of them. Montreal is another one that is reportedly checked in. I think if you go for Shane Wright, that gives you the ability to plug either Nazar or Frondel on the wing. And I don't think it would take much either. Tony, this is something that we've talked about off stream as well, and what it could potentially take. I said Korchinski, Tavo, for that vet, like give them like an NHL ready veteran player. So give them like a swap our broken rookie for their broken rookie, and give them a veteran as well, and then throw in like a third round pick for a sweetener. I think that gets it done. Wait, technical difficulties or oop, Tony's gone. But yeah, I think that would be the best thing to do in the sense that, this is a team that obviously Kyle Davidson thinks that they're done, but the Hawks should ideally try to get some more just to sort of shore up that uh, bottom six, because the bottom six I think is where the big questions lie. I think Tavo was brought in to be Tavo would even be projected to be like the second left winger. On a good day, he could still be on that. He could still play top 6 minutes, which after last season, that is not something that the Hawks could be doing, and so or should be doing rather. So I think first off, by you know once again, forever thankful for everything Tavo did in 2015. Um, that's still one of my great memories is babyface Tavo. Tony is having internet issues, but you know the reunion just hasn't been what we thought it was going to be. So I'm not. I
And
think
I'm back. Sorry for the technical difficulties there. I have no idea what happened. My apologies. Are we still live?
we're still live. I was just defending my decision to part with Tavo.
Hey, we've talked about this a little bit. It was a rough year for Tavo. It was a rough year, but I'm still a big Tavo guy. I don't know how to defend what happened last year, but I don't know if they're gonna want Tavo terrifying in this deal. And that's just what I told you the other day.
Yeah, I think Tavo is not meant to be. Tavo's not meant to be the sweetener in this deal. He's meant to be obviously the big catch is going to be Korchinski. As I mentioned, you take Chicago's broken prospect in need of a change of scenery, and you swap for another prospect that's in need of a change of scenery, and then you give a veteran that is NHL ready, has produced in the past. You're not. It's not going to be like the big needle mover, but it's still something. And then obviously like a third or fourth round pick is like just a sweetener in itself. So I think Tavo is not meant to be the centerpiece of this deal, which is why I think they would be inclined to maybe go for it.
Fair enough. We'll see what happens. I put that as maybe like a 10% chance of happening. I don't know why. It feels a little far-fetched. I think he had 36 goals? Is that his top? Shane Wright?
Tavo or Shane Wright?
Shane Wright.
Shane Wright has never scored more than 19 goals in the NHL.
19. Who had 36? I must have been looking at the wrong stats as the whole computer crashed. I like the ruffling of feathers here. I like the ruffling of feathers. I've got some feathers to ruffle myself. Unfortunately, all of my stuff crashed, so I don't have it in front of me. But I'll wing it, Nick. I'll wing it, and we're gonna ruffle some feathers here as well. And my ruffling of feathers goes out to everyone in Vancouver who still thinks that Connor Bedard is going to leave the Chicago Blackhawks in 5 years. We threw out a nice little tweet from Four Feathers Podcast. You can follow us on X at Four Feathers Pod. Marked safe from Canucks fans tweeting nonsense about how Connor Bedard wants to leave Chicago. 5 years on this deal, Nick, and I mentioned something earlier in the show. There is a no movement clause on the 5th year of his deal. I think this is important to talk about because say the Hawks rebuild goes a little bit awry here. You're in the 5th year of your contract. I want to know who put the full NMC on this 5th year. Was it Connor Bedard? Was it the Blackhawks? Let's say, for the sake of this argument, that it's Connor Bedard. He wanted assurances that in his 5th year, should things not be going well, he wants to ensure that he's not going to be traded and have to do a sign and trade or deal with any sort of movement.
I think that's the more probable one. Yeah.
That's more probable than the Hawks saying, hey, Connor, if things go wrong, we might move you at the end of this, or we might, you might want to move at the end of the deal. We want to lock you in on that 5th year to make sure that, we have your rights. What player signs that? What player is out there going, if I'm trapped here 5 years later and I can't, do anything without having to go through my agent to waive a whole NMC? I think Connor Bedard wanted the NMC. I think Connor Bedard wants to stay in Chicago. I think, for all intents and purposes, Connor Bedard signed this deal because in 5 years, as we talked about earlier, the market will look insanely different. And he's probably going to want to be paid according to what Macklin Celebrini had just signed, and is, going to want to one-up him in a couple of years, or whoever else is in the league and doing these things. Gavin McKenna, look at all of this stuff. He'll get paid by Chicago. He doesn't want to leave here. And all of these Vancouver fans that are in the Four Feathers pod mentions can go fuck themselves. Really, that's the end of the story. You're not getting Connor Bedard in 5 years. It's not going to happen, as Ron says right now. And Lebowski was asking for him. Here's the main guy, B-Hawk for life. Nick, that's what's going to happen. He's going to be a B-Hawk for life. You heard it from GM Ron right here. I don't understand the delusion. The like, people in Vancouver were celebrating today that it was only a 5-year deal, Nick. 5-year deal, and they're celebrating, and there's edits out there of Bedsy in a disgusting looking Canucks jersey. It's nonsense. They're delusional.
I mean, I think if you go on, like, just look at what the last 3 years have been, it's been pretty rough. And I certainly wouldn't blame him if he was unhappy or if he wanted to leave. I think, the big thing is that obviously his words are that he's been very happy across his 3 years. He has no interest in leaving. But at the end of the day, this is a business. And, if things aren't going well, maybe he's going to want to take his talents elsewhere. So I think it's very important that, I think it's very important that they came to that understanding. But I certainly, I don't think it was as delusional as people think too. There were times where I was worried on whether an extension was going to happen or not. So I don't think it was, obviously those Vancouver fans.
Oh no, I'm talking about the Vancouver fans. I'm not worried about us over here in Chicago. We can worry about, things happening or whatever. I just want to make sure they know how delusional they are.
There was that outside.
Don't defend them. Don't defend them, Nick. Don't defend them.
I'm not. No, I think, it's very important. The questions that were being asked when Leo Carlsson got his offer sheet was, if this is what Leo Carlsson is getting, what is Connor Bedard going to fetch in an offer sheet? And I think he was given an offer sheet. I think he was given more than one offer sheet, if you want my opinion on this. And I think he declined them. And, I find it hard to believe that nobody gave him an offer sheet. I think, the fact that he was definitely offered one and made the choice to decline it, because he is, that's kind of the de facto contract, like the social contract that you sign is, if you get drafted first overall, your first couple years are going to be a bit rough. That's kind of the social contract that you sign.
Unless your name is Macklin Celebrini.
I mean, it's just all sunshine and rainbows over in San Jose, even though they are in the same position as the Hawks are right now. It's
People
like,
over in San Jose also think that everything is sunshines and rainbows over there. We'll see how long that lasts.
have you seen that? Have you seen that meme where it's like, it's like Macklin Celebrini in his room. It's like, "Hi, can I ask you this?" "Oh yeah, sure." And then Connor Bedard asks the same question. "Human resources." Like, they're
Dude,
treating it two very different. It's two of the exact same scenarios handled in very different ways. Like, I don't, I no disrespect to Macklin Celebrini. He is an incredible player. He will be an incredible player, and I think I've said it from the beginning. I think this is the next instance of the Sidney Crosby Alex Ovechkin rivalry, where it's not a rivalry. It's just two very good players that are sort of going toe to toe over their careers. So I think that
it'll
I'm
be
very
written
interested to see
about,
how
it'll be
that.
talked about for the
Oh yeah, I'm
next
very interested
15,
to
20
see how
years.
that dynamic continues. But there will be no doubt that Connor Bedard does have a commitment to the city of Chicago and wants to stay here. That was in doubt a little bit, and rightfully so, but he squashed those doubts today. I will say that.
Love it. We got one last segment, Nick. It's time for some stick taps.
Time to give out some stick taps.
Nick, this is the time where we give some stick taps, some shout outs, and talk about good things in the world instead of trying to piss people off. It's a great way to close the show down. Nick, do you have any stick taps to hand out today?
I mean, I think obviously you got to give a stick tap to Kyle Davidson. This was the biggest goal in the offseason, was to get Bedard signed long term. We've said this ad nauseum throughout the show, and he did that. He did exactly what he needed to do on a contract that is not a massive overpay. It will likely go down as a very team friendly deal. And he left the door open for future signings. I think there's work to be done still, absolutely, but he left the door open for future signings, for future moves that could effectively make this team better. So I think, as I said, there's still work to be done, but he did what he needed to do, and got to give him stick taps for getting Bedard extended.
I love it. That was going to be one of my stick taps, Nick, but that's you took it and you ran with it, and it was great. I got to give stick taps out to you. You held the fort down when all of my stuff crashed on the show. I didn't mean to leave you hanging, but also just for all the work that you've done here at On Tap Sportsnet, hopping on with me tonight on Four Feathers podcast. Been fantastic show. So stick taps to you. I also want to throw one more stick tap out there to our guy GM Ron Luce. He's in the comments right now. I asked him, I said the people miss you. Lebowski misses you. He got in here. He's in the comments, and we'll get him back on next show. And hopefully we can run one together. I think you guys can go back and forth on some of these topics as well, and I can sit here and drink beer and not have to host the show, and I'll enjoy the ride. Nick, this has been a fantastic show so far. We'll get to our closing thoughts here. And again, thank you for hopping on, Nick. It's been a great hour talking Blackhawks hockey. Saturday night, it's 11:30 right now in the middle of summer, and we're talking Blackhawks hockey. How great is that? Like,
I
let's
was thinking,
appreciate that.
I'm like, this is probably the latest into the summer that I've worn a Blackhawks jersey since the Dynasty days.
I'm getting stuff from Ron here. The boss wanting to share the work. Yeah, of course, share the work. It's a team effort, Ron. It's a team effort, and I'm glad you're in here in the comments. But Nick, it's great to talk hockey right now. I mean, I love baseball. I love golf. I know you love golf, and we'll probably be watching the Open in 5 hours. So we've got a quick turnaround here, but before we get on out of here, why don't we get some final thoughts from you here? If there's any other closing statements, anything you want to close this show down with, and then I'll run the old promo scripts that Ron normally runs, and we'll get the heck out of here and get on with our Saturday nights.
Yeah, I think the future is bright. Obviously, that first month I think that's the reason why a Patrick Kane signing makes the most sense, is because that first month without Connor Bedard is going to absolutely suck. That's, those are, we've seen when he's missed time, the team is not necessarily in the best of spots. You have guys that are trying to do too much, trying to fill the void. It's very difficult when he's not there. So I'm wishing a speedy recovery to his shoulder, and hopefully we can get that first month over with as soon as possible. But this is a team that, dare I say, was on a playoff pace before Bedard went down last year. Like, I feel like that's not
They were.
too crazy to say. And
They were.
so a full season of Bedard with Bowen Byram, that's the big one. I feel like that's something we haven't talked about nearly enough tonight, is how Byram is going to factor into this team in that regard. But I think the future is bright. I think that this season is going to be a lot more fun than it was last year. I think there's still going to be some bumps along the ride. This will be my last feather ruffle. If they do a press conference to announce the signing, when they hold up the jersey, blah, 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 it's going to have a C on it.
I like that. I think that's coming, probably in the press release or the announcement. But I think it's coming. I think that there's definitely going to be a captaincy named this season, and it's going to be Connor Bedard. Love the closing thoughts. Mine is really, I hope Connor can stay healthy through this season. Yeah. You're already going to miss at least a month in the grand scheme of things for this season. Things could be a lot worse. I'm prepared for it to last to Thanksgiving before he gets back, just on the cautious side. And that's going to be a tough period of hockey to get through. And I agree with you that signing Patrick Kane or making another forward addition of any sorts will probably help that, as long as it's of quality. But I don't think that anybody will pack the doors of the United Center quite the way that 88 will. That's about it. Stay healthy, Bedard, because we're going to need it, and I want to see what a full season of a healthy Bedard does look like. And hopefully in year 2, we don't have to start the season without 98 and the eventual captain of this Chicago Blackhawks team. Nick, this was fantastic. I'm glad you were able to hop on here. It's a late Saturday night, and I'm sure that there are plenty of other things that are going on around town. But talking Blackhawks with you has been an absolutely fantastic time. And thank you to all the listeners who tuned in tonight. The comment section was great. Love you guys. Continue to comment on this stuff. Ask for the main guy. Where's the main guy? That's going to be one of my favorite comments on this show of all time. I'm already joking with Ron about that in the text messages. But make sure you're also following at Four Feathers Pod. On X, you can follow OnTap Sportsnet at OnTap Sportsnet. Make sure you go to ontapsportsnet.com for all your Chicago sports literature and podcasting needs. You can follow myself at Tony on Tap, and you can follow Nick, who so kindly joined us tonight, at Nick Neumayer. It's right there. It's scrolling on the bottom. It'll be in the show description. That's pretty much it for today. Thank you again to everybody. Let's go Hawks.